Welcome back to Fast Jet Performance then. My name is Tim Davies, and who's the doctor they told you to go see? That's right, Dr. FJP, and I am back in session bringing medication for the nation as we talk about aviation. That rhymed. That actually rhymed. I'm going to write it down. Cleopatra coming at you, and what's not coming back with a canopy on today? Well, it's this Typhoon from RAF Coningsby then. That's right, it was flying out this morning, and it came back without a canopy. People are saying, bird strike. That's not a bird strike, mate. That's been jettisoned right there. Let me talk a little bit about it, all right? So I didn't fly this aircraft ever. I was a tornado guy. Pictures on the back of the shack attack tells you what I've been flying, but I never actually flew this airplane. That said, I taught a lot of students that went on to this, and as you can see there, the entire canopy structure has been removed. I'm going to play some pictures right now. We're going to go through it just so we can see what exactly we're supposed to be looking at. So here we have an RAF Typhoon then, and one thing I want you to note then, if I zoom in a little bit on this picture, is this area around the Typhoon cockpit, that kind of whole bit around the bottom of it there. And that's the part of the cockpit kind of rail that attaches itself from the aircraft. And you'll notice from the picture I'm going to show you in a minute that that bit of the canopy is actually missing. Now, the Typhoon cockpit is quite a busy place. There's not the greatest deal of room. And one of the things I will kind of be pointing out in a minute is sometimes when you reach for certain things, other things can get moved, let's just say. But again, look at that top of that canopy there, and you can see that there is a part that attaches the glass, the perspex as it were, to the actual kind of frame. There's a frame to that canopy. That's quite important. And let's just have a look at the story then before we go on. Fighter jet canopy dumped in mid-air emergency. All right, fighter jet has landed safely after an in-flight emergency, the RAF has said. Basically, there was an emergency going on. Air Force confirmed the canopy of a Typhoon from 11th Squadron at RAF Coningsby has been jettisoned by the pilot during a flight which took it over the North Sea. I said it was jettisoned earlier, actually, so it's quite interesting they've said that. Now, why has it been jettisoned? That's the sort of thing we need to think about. And there's one of my former students in the cockpit. You can see, again, it's not the greatest space in the world, is it? When your arms and hands move around, you do have to be a little bit careful about where you're putting them, of course. You've got the ejection seat handle in the middle there between the legs. You've got the stick, so traditional style layout cockpit. And on the left-hand side there, you can see by his left leg there, it looks like you've got the emergency oxygen down on that side. That's going to be quite important. We're going to come back to that in a second. And here's the cockpit itself. In the middle, as I said, you've got the seat firing handle. You pull that, the canopy goes, the seat follows. I believe it's a Mark 16A. And on the left-hand side of the seat itself, you've got some emergency oxygen. Now, something that you might find difficult to see here, but I will point it out with an arrow. Outboard of the throttles, you do actually have something there, and that's the emergency canopy jettison on the outside there, outboard of the throttle. So on your left-hand side, and when you're taught in simulator drills, you'll go, right, you've got this problem, let's go and reach this. Your left hand will move out to pick up something. And I think what's happened here is that this pilot has had an oxygen failure. He's gone and reached for the emergency oxygen and inadvertently fired the canopy off. Again, another picture there just showing that emergency oxygen handle on the left there. And we can't really see it because, well, I'm in the way, but either way, you can't really see it anyway. But just outboard of those throttles there on the left-hand side, you would have the canopy jettison. And of course, people are, pilots are practiced in using that in simulators. So what really has happened in this aeroplane? Well, there it is then. And this chap's photo, I think it's called Richard Boettcher down there. If you can't see his name, I'll just quickly show you that now. There you go. And he's taken some pictures of this jet landing, and you can see the canopy is missing. Notice also that when I talked about the rail is also missing on this aircraft. Let's have a closer look. So you can see there, obviously the rail of the front part of the canopy will always stay attached to the aircraft. That canopy never goes, but you can see back from that first sort of ridge line, the frame on the canopy, all the way back, that frame is removed. That to me signifies that the canopy has been jettisoned. Birds don't take off canopy. A bird strike into a canopy like that, it might break the initial glass. On a Typhoon, it probably won't. On a Tornado, it didn't either. It may shatter the rear canopy. Again, rare on an airplane like this. Also, I believe the profile this pilot was flying was over the North Sea at height. And when I say at height, what I mean, kind of like 30,000 feet, something like that. And of course, birds don't really exist, especially over the North Sea. You've got to think about birds need food, they need nests. Birds don't just wander around over the North Sea for no reason. And if this jet was out in the ranges over there on the North Sea, it's not a bird strike this guy's gone and got, or this girl, of course. It's just that the canopy's been jettisoned. Well, as I say, my thinking is that this guy or girl has got a some kind of oxygen issue at height, probably feeling a little bit hypoxic, I would suggest. And then what do we do for hypoxia? Well, you've got to check mask connections and flow, making sure everything's in there. And then the drill calls for you to pull that emergency oxygen lever that we saw on the jet, just outboard of the throttle quadrant. But of course, if your hand was going out there to reach the oxygen lever and you kind of moved it out, your hand's already on the throttle, you just rotate it and you pull that lever thinking you're pulling the oxygen, well, the canopy is going to go. It's going to be a hell of a shock. It's got rocket motors on the bottom. It's going to fire off and clear the tail of the aircraft. And that's a pretty big tail it's got to go over, isn't it? Make no joke about that. So the rockets fire it, same as a tornado, and it lifts off the aircraft in a massive, massive rush. And you probably even got time to put your head down, because normally you'd be ejecting, canopy would be fired off, and then about half a second later, the seat's going to follow it. The canopy's got to clear that tail. And if you do need jettison in an emergency, of course, for some reason, as has happened here, it can't damage the tail, so it's got to lift itself all the way over it, and that's why it has these rockets alongside it. And of course, that's why that whole frame of it is missing in this picture here, and you see it's all gone, the whole canopy is gone. So what I think's happened there is the pilot has become hypoxic, or felt the hypoxic, which means they've lost oxygen. They're feeling slow. When I was hypoxic in my Air Force career, then my hands would get tingly, my chest would get tight, I'd feel maybe a bit agitated. And then they might go, right, I'm just going to pull the emergency oxygen anyway. They've reached for it, and in doing so, they've reached for the wrong handle. Now, of course, this is what we would call a mishap, but I'd much rather a pilot did this and actually got that emergency oxygen. Of course, by doing this, you're depressurizing the cockpit. Technically, you're making the situation worse. So if the canopy has gone, I guarantee they would have then pulled that oxygen lever anyway, because they would have to. This is obviously something that's happened to the Air Force this week. If we go back a week, though, and last week, of course, a Typhoon targeting pod, looks like a lightning pod, and the pylon itself seemed to detach from the aircraft and end up in a field in where was that? Yorkshire somewhere, East Yorkshire. So, not a great week or two for the Air Force. I mean, don't get me wrong, these things happen. That's part of aviation, guys, all right? So it's not necessarily something that we need to be concerned with. This pylon needs to be looked at, of course, but the fact the canopy came off an aeroplane that flew out of Coningsby, it just happens. Let's not forget then that the pilots that fly these airplanes are exceptionally capable. It's not a mistake. If you're hypoxic at 30,000 feet, you've only got about 10 seconds of useful consciousness before you die, all right? That's the key. So the first thing you do is you reach for that handle and you pull it. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes you lose the canopy of an aeroplane. These things happen. I'd rather someone did that and get it wrong and survive and bring the jet back than not have that person at all. So hopefully that's explained what's happened to this jet, guys. Hope you're all well. Remember, work on yourselves. I'll talk to you later. Tim Davies, Fast Jet Performance.